Have you ever stopped to wonder why, no matter how hard you try, things don't seem to go the way you plan? How many times have you felt exhausted trying to control every detail of your life, from the small daily choices to the big milestones? Sometimes we try so hard to force life to follow our plan, but it just doesn't shape up the way we imagine. Alan Watts, with his unique wisdom, reminds us that life is not something that should be rigidly controlled, but something that should be lived in harmony with its natural flow. When you decide to stop forcing life, something wonderful happens. You start to see the right doors opening for you. It's as if, by releasing tension and control, you allow life to show you the paths that were often in front of you all along. It's not about being passive or giving up on your ambitions, but about being wiser by realizing when to act and when to simply trust the process. The truth is that most of the time, our resistance to what is, to the present, creates a field of emotional tension that only leads to more frustration. The secret to living more lightly and clearly is precisely in trusting. Alan Watts teaches us that when we stop swimming against the current, we truly begin to flow. And that doesn't mean giving up. It means acting in a way that is more aligned with who you really are. If this content made sense to you and you feel like it's time to change the way you live, subscribe to the channel now. Here we constantly address how you can live lighter and in harmony with the natural flow of life. Don't miss the upcoming videos and the transformations you can apply to your daily life. If you've ever tried to control every aspect of your life, you know exactly how exhausting it can be. From small everyday choices to big decisions, we often believe that the secret to achieving our goals lies in our absolute control over everything. But the reality is that this attempt at control is an illusion. Life, with its unpredictability and its ups and downs, will never be something you can hold in your hands. Alan Watts challenges us to let go of this belief that life must be controlled, and instead learn to let go. This does not mean becoming passive, but rather learning to act lightly, allowing things to happen in due time. In his philosophy, true power lies in knowing when to surrender and trusting the process. This is the principle of Wu Wei that he explored so much. Effortless action, the ability to act in tune with life instead of fighting against it. In practice, this may seem difficult, especially because we have been trained, since we were little, to believe that constant effort is the path to success. However, Watts reminds us that true wisdom lies in realizing that when we stop trying to control everything, we find more freedom and clarity. Natural action, that which arises from a place of trust, is more powerful than any forced effort. Imagine for a moment if you started allowing yourself to flow more, instead of fighting so much against obstacles. The freedom to be yourself, without the burden of constant control, can open doors you never thought possible. It seems almost counterintuitive, doesn't it? The idea that resistance to the unexpected is one of the greatest sources of suffering we experience. However, this truth is at the heart of what Alan Watts teaches us when he talks about letting go. When we cling to control and try to avoid life's surprises and unexpected events, what we really do is create more tension and frustration. We live in a constant state of alert, trying to plan each step, anticipate problems, and in the end we feel exhausted and far from peace. Throughout our lives, we have been conditioned to avoid what is uncertain, to fight against what we cannot understand. However, this desire for control puts us in direct conflict with the reality of life. It is, by definition, unpredictable and changeable. The flow of life, with its ups and downs, is always beyond our ability to control, and true wisdom lies in learning to navigate this uncertainty with confidence. Alan Watts suggests that instead of fighting the unexpected, we should learn to embrace what comes. This does not mean giving in to passivity, but rather being in harmony with what arises in the moment. This act of acceptance allows us to release control and make room for opportunities that might previously have gone unnoticed. Resistance to what is inevitable does not make us more in control, but only increases our suffering. As you begin to accept the flow of life and trust more in its natural changes, you begin to realize that, deep down, life was never against you. She is just asking you to trust the process and follow your path more lightly. Have you ever stopped to think about how much energy we spend trying to force things to happen? Whether in a job that doesn't satisfy us, in relationships that don't flow as we would like, or even in our own life expectations. Alan Watts invites us to reflect on the practice of Wu Wei, a profound concept from Taoism, which can be translated as acting without effort or acting without forcing. This, however, has nothing to do with laziness or inactivity, as many people might think. In fact, the Wu Wei, it is the true action that arises when we are aligned with the natural flow of life. When you act according to your true essence, and not out of obligation or fear, action becomes much more fluid and efficient. The Wu Wei teaches us that, by letting go of control, we find the freedom to act in a more intuitive, more present way. When you try to force a situation, tension builds, and energy becomes stagnant. However, when you act lightly and consciously, your action becomes more powerful and direct, like an arrow that goes directly to its target without excessive effort. It sounds magical, but in reality, it is a practice of awareness and presence. By releasing control, you allow things to move naturally and fluidly. This can be applied to any area of your life, from your personal relationships to your professional development. When you stop forcing, the doors open more easily, and you begin to see what was previously hidden. The Wu Wei, it does not mean inactivity, but acting wisely, with understanding and patience, respecting the rhythms and cycles of life. This is the secret to transforming effort into wisdom. We've all had those moments when it feels like life is pushing you down a path you don't want to take, or when things don't turn out the way you imagined. And, in these moments, our tendency is to try even harder to control what is happening, tightening our grip and forcing things to adjust to our will. However, Alan Watts reminds us that rather than forcing the course of life, we must learn to trust the process. Trusting the process means not giving up on your goals, but understanding that the path to them can be unexpected and full of detours. This trust is not something passive. Rather, it is the courage to allow things to unfold without pressure. By resisting control, you create the space necessary for what's good for you to truly manifest. This is the secret that few people understand. By letting life unfold naturally, you end up finding the truest and most authentic paths to your happiness. True peace comes from abandoning the constant struggle against what we cannot change and accepting that, deep down, life has its own rhythm. When we begin to trust this rhythm, rather than forcing ourselves against it, we find the freedom to be who we truly are. This does not mean being passive or silent, but rather acting when necessary, without carrying the weight of expectation or fear. It's time to stop fighting the currents and start flowing with them. The process of life is often wiser than any planning we can do. Have you ever stopped to think about how much resistance to the unexpected can weigh on your life? It seems like we always try to plan everything, predict the future, and avoid anything that might catch us by surprise. And the truth is that life is full of surprises. Some say that the only constant is change, and that has never been more true. Alan Watts teaches us that resistance to the unexpected not only causes stress, but also keeps us from true freedom. The fear of the unknown traps us in a constant cycle of anxiety, and this prevents us from experiencing the most beautiful things in life. But what if you started accepting the unexpected, not as something to be feared, but as a natural and enriching part of life? Instead of closing yourself off to what you cannot control, you would embrace uncertainty and trust that it can bring wonderful experiences. It's not about being reckless or reckless, but about understanding that true safety comes from recognizing that we don't know everything, and that that's okay. When you stop fighting the unknown, you open yourself up to new possibilities. Each surprise brings an opportunity for growth, and instead of getting stuck in resistance, you begin to flow with life. The freedom to live does not come from controlling everything around you, but from learning to live with what comes, with confidence, acceptance, and an open mind to what is to come. True strength lies in knowing how to embrace the unknown, without fear of being surprised. Imagine a moment when you stop fighting life, when you finally understand that you don't need to control everything to be happy. This is the point of transformation that Alan Watts teaches us. When you release tension, resistance, and begin to flow with the natural rhythm of life, it's not about letting everything happen without action, but acting with awareness, lightness, and, above all, without the anxiety of having to control each step. This letting go opens doors to a new type of existence where you allow yourself to be guided by trust and not fear. True freedom comes when you realize that life is not something to be conquered, but something to be lived authentically. If you are ready to experience this transformation and learn to flow more easily, subscribe to the channel. We have many videos that will help you discover this new way of living. And that's it for today, folks. Remember, life is not a fight to win, but a dance to be lived. May you find the courage to stop forcing it and start flowing with it. Until the next video.